So a little background first. DC's Peacemaker sets a new bar for character writing in comic book shows. These are the best characters in DC and probably better than even most in Marvel, excluding probably the Guardians of the Galaxy. That being said, the show seems to struggle a little bit with its greater thematic messaging, especially when it comes to politics and philosophy. This is evident in the way the show chooses to handle the ideals of libertarianism, or as the show likes to put it, proto-fascist libertarian idea of freedom. Now, this topic probably seemed like a slam dunk for director James Gunn. After all, the character of Peacemaker has already been heavily criticized in the form of The Comedian from the graphic novel Watchmen. For those of you not in the know, Alan Moore's Watchmen was written as a satirical take on the heavy moral objectivism present in a lot of early Golden Age superhero comics, particularly those in Charlton Comics, Peacemaker being one of the superheroes from these early comics. He was written to be someone who was willing to fight anyone or anything in the pursuit of peace. The inherent contradiction in using violence in pursuit of no violence is what Watchmen takes aim at. The character of the comedian is used as a stand-in for the Peacemaker, and he uses much of the same justification in why he commits violence, in the pursuit of a greater good. All of this is to cover up his underlying psychopathy and very volatile past. And while James Gunn doesn't seem to view Peacemaker as contemptibly as Moore seems to, the underlying belief that violence in pursuit of peace being a foolhardy pursuit is still maintained by Gunn in the show. The difference, however, is that Peacemaker is fundamentally good by nature. He's a good guy. And he only adopted this consequentialist philosophy as a means to cope with his own lack of self-worth. He had a terrible upbringing, and he now sees himself as a terrible person. He feels he needs to earn the love of others because he doesn't deserve it himself. Ultimately, he overcomes this, and this is why at the end of the season, Peacemaker is willing to sacrifice world peace if it means he can save his friends. He doesn't need to earn their love. He already has it. But it's in the way Peacemaker defines world peace where the series seems to confuse its messaging. In the final scene, Goth, the leader of an alien force known as the Butterflies, gives a big speech about how the Butterflies only want to take over the human race because they can make the decisions humanity is unable to make on its own. Now, this is a very basic villain motivation as far as comic book villains go, except for one thing. As part of her critique of the human race, Goth mentions that people treat minor conveniences as assaults on their freedom. Now, this is a pretty clear and cut reference to COVID restrictions, the implication being that if the Butterflies took over the world, humanity would be a lot more receptive to wearing masks. How, it's unclear. That seems to be what it's saying. Peacemaker ends up refusing the offer and stops the Butterflies. Later, though, he remarks, "Did I just kill the world?" And it's actually Adebayo who responds, "You gave us a chance to make our own decisions instead of our bug overlords." So what it seems like she's actually saying is that you gave our human overlords more of a decision to enforce restrictions instead of our bug overlords. It's a strange distinction, definitely, but there might be some merit to it. After all, humans elect their own world leaders, which more aligns itself with the concept of free will. But then Adebayo goes on to ask Peacemaker why he wouldn't align himself with the Butterflies, accusing him of adhering to the previously mentioned proto-fascist libertarian idea of freedom. A little background first. An argument amongst critics of libertarianism is that the freedom of choice is a luxury offered only to those who have the means to choose, and placing an expectation of those who cannot afford such luxuries only serves to punish those who have circumstances outside of their control, in turn creating a hierarchy of only the like-minded. One could call this a proto-fascist structure in the guise of libertarianism, or a proto-fascist libertarian idea of freedom. It's strange then that Adebayo would assume humans are incapable of making correct moral decisions, but our bug overlords, the Butterflies, who are capable of making correct moral decisions, shouldn't be allowed to. But that's the point of the show, right? No matter how right you think you are, your opinion is only just as valid as everyone else's. That's Peacemaker. That's this season. The problem is Adebayo and Peacemaker both agreed that COVID restrictions are probably an inherent good, The only way you can justify that there are inherent goods is to also accept that the ends should justify the means, in which case wouldn't the butterflies be right in trying to take over the world? The whole thing is probably hypocritical, which is fine. People are complex and have complex moralities. No one's going to fall on one side of an issue in its entirety. People are on a spectrum in how they view the world. But it becomes an issue when the show itself seems to claim that libertarianism is wrong. Ultimately, it's fine, because Peacemaker learns he no longer needs to hide behind politics or philosophy. He finally found people to fight for, and only now is he discovering what he actually believes in. But if philosophy is a territory that James Gunn is going to continue to address in this show, then maybe he should take a page out of Peacemaker's playbook and find out what he believes in.